Hello, my friends. Welcome to Two Priests on the Patio podcast. Here we gather in the quiet space between science and soul with Reverend Canon Sue Ann Ward and the Venerable Jeff Ward, partners in ministry and in life. We ask the deeper questions. What does it mean to be awake in this world? To suffer, to doubt, to believe, to begin again and again. This is a sanctuary for conversation. So come as you are. My name is Shay Marville, and today I have the awesome privilege of introducing you to Ven Jeff and Canon Sue Ann. And actually, this is their podcast. I'm just hanging out here. I'm just exploring with them. We are introducing a new series called Awakening. It is inspired by the work of Dr. Lisa Miller, and we are using her book, The Awakened Brain, to look at the relationship between spirituality and science. And we are inspired by love and the mission to help and serve through the Christian faith, through these two incredible priests that I'm going to be interviewing. And you're going to hear less from me and a lot more from them. Sue Ann, Jeff.
Hi.
Welcome to your podcast.
Thank you, and welcome to you too.
Thank you. How do you explain what prayer is?
I think prayer is a conversation, and it's a time of growing in relationship with the divine and with each other. And it's not just about talking or asking for things, it's about being in conversation. So prayer involves listening and just being open to what the divine presence has to say to us. And it's about us sharing what's on our hearts. So it's not about us trying to get God to do something. It's about us becoming more and more part of the flow of love in this world, and just seeking our true selves, our best selves, our most Christ-like selves. And I believe that when we are that, when we can live from a place of love in this world, we make the world a better place. And that's my goal when I pray, is just to be in relationship with each person and with the holy.
Then Jeff, how would you explain prayer? Now, I know you're going to say what she said, but what is it? How would you express it?
Instead of restating what she just said, because it was well said, I would say something we're probably going to get to eventually, especially if we continue talking about the awakened brain, but how prayer connects us with all of God's creation. So I know I and Sue Ann, we both believe in a total interconnectedness of all that is created. So anything that exists is connected, and prayer is a way for us to express that connection between people, between ourselves and nature, ourselves and all of the universe. And we can talk about that maybe another time in terms of string theory and other sorts of physics. But to me, that prayer is a way for us to express that connection.
Do you think that we need to bring more prayerfulness into our daily life in order to have that ongoing conversation that Sue Ann had just referred to?
I think, so Sue Ann said a prayer out loud.
Yes.
We often also engage in contemplative prayer, which is a way to pray, just sitting quietly, but also expressing those same thoughts and those same feelings into ourselves, into the world. And it doesn't have to be, you formulating some kind of phrases and words and using formulas themselves, but just Being quietly present can also be a form of prayer and a way to do that. Being present with somebody, I mean, Sue-Ann and I both as priests spend a lot of time caring with people, including people who are sick, people who are in hospital. Just being present with people is a prayer. Certainly holding someone's hand can be a prayer. We've recently spent a lot of time with one of our grandchildren, our grandson, being able to just be present with him and doing things with him and engaging with him and honestly just making eye contact with him is a prayer. So,
Well, I mentioned earlier that we're in this period of time where there's a lot of hostility. Or maybe we had this conversation a little bit before actually we came on live. But there's a lot of hostility about religion and about prayer and about the practice of faith. And part of what inspired this podcast was that we had all read the book, The Awakened Brain by Lisa Miller, and we wanted to show the relationship or talk about that relationship, actually, not show it, talk about that relationship between science and religion. Now, what was really fascinating to me about both of you having that conversation is that this is your second profession. Like you had other vocations before you became priest. And one of you, was in science and one of you was a teacher. And I thought it would be really interesting for our audience to hear more about that part of your life so that we could start to really understand your thinking and the questioning that you're bringing to this larger conversation about the relationship between religion, spirituality, and science.
So I think it's unfortunate that there has been a dichotomy between science and religion, and I don't think that it is helpful at all. I think that, first of all, our focus should be about spirituality. Through growing spiritually, growing in wisdom and in consciousness so that we can be more loving people. And some people do that through a religion. Religion comes out of our culture and where we grew up, and so we can live it out through our religion. But really it's essentially about something spiritual within us. And I think the beauty of science is that it helps us to be able to see that in our world and to measure it and to play with it. We can use science. We can say, well, what about this? And find ways to test it and make discoveries so that we can understand. And what I love about Lisa Miller's book and the science that she presents is that it has cast a new light on our ability to know that spiritual practices, when we pray or meditate or walk meaningfully and intentionally in nature, when we sing or when we chant, that it makes a difference, that it is healing, and that it can heal people who are very unwell. It can be protective and just offer all of us a more awakened and enlivened and wonderful life. So I think science is wonderful, and in fact, my first degree was a science degree.
Really? And what was your first degree in?
So I did a Bachelor of Science at the University of Toronto, and I studied biology and psychology, and I did a specialist in exceptionality and human learning.
So both of you are scientists. How fascinating. And how did you make the transition from science to being inspired to become a priest?
So the whole ministry thing was actually first. So I can remember as a young child, a child of 8 or 9, taking music lessons and discovering that there was a Bible study that my music teacher held in her home after I took my lesson, and wanting to participate in that. And in grade 9, talking to the guidance counselor about what do I need to do, to become a leader in the faith community. And really it was not at all encouraged. And at that time I was worshiping in a Roman Catholic church, which was beautiful. I love the sacraments of the church, but it wasn't a community that was going to lift me up as a female to leadership. And so I pursued other things.
So you always felt a calling towards being a leader within church life, within
Yes.
faith.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, fascinating. And when did you meet? When did you both meet?
So at this point, I'll say we've known each other a very long time. I've known her since she was 10 years old. I won't tell you how many years that is because that would give away her age. But what I will say...
But how old were you? Just so it's okay.
15.
Yes,
But we weren't dating.
Okay,
Just
yes,
to be
I
clear.
understand. Okay, just because as soon as you say religion
I know.
people start thinking weird
Yes.
things.
The reason why I point out how long I've known her is that what she just said to you, it took many years of us being married and together before I ever learned that about her, because it was something she had to resolve for herself before we even had a chance to get together. So I wasn't aware of that. And likewise, I was on a different path of faith, having been grown up in the United Church. I was introduced to the Roman Catholic faith, and I decided that I wanted to become a follower in the Roman Catholic Church, and that meant I had to go through Roman Catholic initiation for adults classes, which at the time was very formalized and was over many weeks. And during that process, I felt a call to become a priest. And while I was going through that process, I was talking to the priest who was leading this, and he had me go away and he said, I want you to pray and I want you to decide whether you should be a father or a dad. But you can't be both because this is the Roman Catholic Church and you can't be married. You must be celibate if you are going to be a priest. So I went away, I prayed about it. He went away and prayed about it with his community. And when we got back together, we agreed that I really wanted to be a dad and a priest. I couldn't do that, so I should just be a dad. And so I put that behind me and we got together and we had our children. And after living a life that was wonderful and fulsome, but also not really fulfilling the way we felt called to live, we finally, every year we would have our summer vacations with our kids and we would walk the beach at Sauble Beach and we would talk about our lives and reflect on how things were going and what we thought we should do differently. And one of those walks led us to both learn from each other that we had felt this calling for a long time, but neither of us knew that. So,
and yet we were both very involved in church the whole time. We were youth ministers and in part of every community, every committee you could think of in our church.
Everything from raising money to build churches to leading youth and children's ministry and our poor priest had no idea what to do with us because I was married, couldn't be a priest. Sue Ann was a woman, she couldn't be a priest. But he also believed we were called to that as well. So it led us toward a very different path.
Yes.
And
were you in the Anglican Church at that point? You
No.
were you were in the United.
Roman Catholic.
Oh, so you were
we were both Roman Catholic
You
at
were
that
both
point.
Roman
Yes.
Catholic at that point, but you were participating in the church. You were active members, and you felt a deep and growing, desire to find ways to serve.
Yes.
Beyond, well, as ordained ministers in the church, because as Sue Ann said, we had already done just about everything else one can do in the church and not be ordained. So.
And what were you doing at the time?
So I was working at a technology company at the time. So I started out as a computer engineer at IBM, and then I evolved and did many different things, but stayed within that technology field in the same company, actually. We became a new company, but I stayed in the same location doing the same kind of work. But we spent most of our time doing stuff that was spiritual, stuff that was related to the church outside of our work. And for me, science is simply the way that we can study, look at, understand, discover whatever it is that already exists in the universe. And the wonderful thing about science is you have this feeling about something, so then you decide to test that feeling to see if it's true, and you may determine it is, you might determine it isn't, and then somewhere down the road, even if you determine something, someone else will have a new idea, and they'll test what you were saying you thought you knew, and they find out that maybe we know something different again and again. And one of the reasons why we were so interested in Lisa Miller's book was because she started in a different place, but she had a sense that there was something more. And then science was able to answer that for her. And other people also studied that, science, and were able to determine the same thing. So,
did you feel that you had to justify your faith and and that sensation, that feeling of that you're part of something bigger with science? Or did you feel like science had to be was born out of your faith? Like, which one came first, chicken or the egg kind of thing?
Both.
Both.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of being immersed and interested and inspired by God's world.
I don't think either of us have ever lived any point in our lives and not felt a connection with God. For us, that's who that higher power is. Both of us were born into families where, being part of a church was just, what you did. And we were involved. And as Sue Ann said, she started, being at least attached to a Bible study at a very young age. And we both were in Sunday school and things like that when we were children. So, but that fascination with the world around us, I think, was something that was also, started at a very young age.
Wow. I guess, in Lisa Miller's book, one of the things that she's identifying and I mean throughout all of her work, is that this is not an anomaly, and it's not actually unusual, even though our society sort of represents faith and religion in a way that it's like outside of science, that we are hardwired neurologically. There's a space in us that requires spirituality, that it requires attention to our spirit. Can you speak to that? Like, did you know that before you read the book, or is this something that was innate in you from, an early age?
I think that particular thing was new, but often you sense something, you kind of know something, and then somebody else puts words to it or facts to it.
Yes.
And you think, yes, because you had that sense that that's the way it was. And I just believe that we are spiritual beings. Not only is it in our neurology, like it's in our genes, right?
What do you mean by that?
Just like our eye color, our height, other facets of our phenotype and genotype, being spiritual is in our genes. And that's why when we don't live out our spirituality, we can become very sick. When we suppress it and we ignore it, we lose our health. And I think that's part of the struggle that many people are having now in our world, where it is cast aside.
Yes.
And being treated like it's nonsense.
Yes, yes.
And people are so focused on achieving. It's
and
about money and
consuming
power and stuff and things that aren't healthy and things that don't matter.
I'm gonna, I'm a novice here, so I'm gonna ask you to break it down for me a bit more, because when you say that it's like your eye color or your hair, it's in our genes. What does it mean to have that spirituality is in our genes? Like, what does that mean?
So Kenneth Kendler has done twin studies, and according to the studies that he has done, in terms of the innateness of spirituality, it's about 29%. And then the other 71% is how we nurture our spiritual selves.
I see. That explains a lot about myself. but Jeff, what can you add to that? What's your perspective on it? Because I know when I actually am the one who told you about this book.
You are.
Because
Thank goodness for that.
I'm always seeking. And I was fascinated by the fact that there was this relationship between science and the proving that there's a neurological space in our brain that is for spirituality. Like, what did it make you feel like when you read that, when you saw the evidence, not just read it, but when you saw the evidence of it?
So to echo what Sue Ann said, I think for a long time, and we had learned it from spiritual leaders who had taught us that humans are, we have a physical self, we have a cognitive self, and we have a spiritual self. So body, mind, and spirit. And all of those things are created, and we have to nurture those things. But then it's how she opens her book, where she talks about doing these brain scans and no one knowing what the results were going to be, and everyone being surprised by it. But what it does is it supports this idea that our brains are functioning differently, like the structure of our brain and how it works, when we are catering to our spiritual selves and when we are doing spiritual practices. And what Sue Ann was talking about with Kenneth Kendler, that didn't surprise us, but it was a lovely discovery to realize that it was what we had felt in our bones was the reality for us, that this is something that is, as we would look at it, God had created this part of us, that we were wired for this. There was natural pathways for this. Didn't surprise us, but it really, really excited us.
Do you think that you recognized that in each other when you first, started to find each other and come to love each other and know each other? Do you think you found just without even words, do you think you noticed there's something here?
Jeff is just an incredibly warm, genuine person. And I think that is his spirit just shining through. And I think that I appreciated that from a very young age and wanted to be friends, and it blossomed into a lot more. And I am so glad that we have had the opportunity to have a beautiful life together and raise children and grandchildren. And actually, we went to seminary together. We both left our jobs and we went to seminary, and we spent 3 years going to the same classes and having conversations in the car on the way to and from, and reading each other's papers and discussing and debating and wondering. And it's been a beautiful experience.
Tell me about that. Like, you went to seminary school together. You were already married for maybe 15, 20 years at that point, right? And okay, we're not sharing numbers. But you had 4 kids at this point.
And just to give you an idea, so 3 of those were teenagers. So that'll help you understand how long we'd been together.
Yes.
So.
Okay.
and we actually had 7 because we had 3 foster children at the time, because Jeff and I have been foster parents for many years at that point. Okay,
I see. You see. Okay. Wow. We're gonna need a very long series here. Now, so you quit your jobs.
Yes.
How you quit your jobs to become priest?
Yeah.
Yes.
And when did you say to each other, I need to quit my job. I need to leave I want to become a priest. Like, when did that happen?
So I think what we decided to do was to go to the Roman Catholic Seminary and talk to the Dean of Admissions. And we had this beautiful meeting with the Dean of Admissions.
Whose name will remain to us.
Because what he said to us, word for word, is, I believe you have a genuine calling, but Sue Ann, you are not going to be ordained in your lifetime. Why don't you go down the street and talk to the Anglicans? And
Stunning.
we did. Same day. We went to Trinity College and we talked to the dean there. And after having a conversation, we decided that we would do 2 things. 1, we would start worshiping in an Anglican church. And 2, we would take 1 course at Trinity College. And we did. We took New Testament together. And it was during that New Testament course that we resigned from our jobs so that we could go full-time.
It was leaping off a cliff. I think that's
I
fair
would
to
say.
say.
And growing wings on the way down.
I will say, so Sue-Ann mostly described that. So yes, and I can tell you our teenage children were very worried because mom and dad both being unemployed was not something that they thought was going to be a good future for them. And yes, we did have 3 foster children. And while doing that, we were both working part-time jobs while we were going to school full-time as well. And to this day, I don't know how we did it. So we believe, that as people of faith, we believe that God helped us through that time, as well as a lot of people around us who helped us at that time. But I will say this, my boss, when I left Celestica, was not surprised when I told him I was doing this, and was very encouraging and said, that was just the right thing for me. So there were things people saw in us at the time that didn't surprise them. And I would just say one other thing. Sue-Ann and I both grew up with some very strong spiritual guides. For me, it was my mother. For Sue-Ann, it was her grandmother. People who instilled in us this sense of faith, of community, of love.
Yes.
And that faith also includes that, sometimes you have to take risks and just assume that it will work out.
Trust.
Trust.
Yeah. Well, I totally relate to that because as you both know, my mother was a woman of faith and certainly wasn't somebody who tried to be perfect, but I feel like if she wasn't the person that introduced me to faith, I wouldn't have such a loving perspective on it because she seemed to represent all the things that we believe are valuable and good about loving all people and being friendly and giving and smiling and trusting and serving and all of that kind of thing. I just had to get a little, plug in for her.
But Lisa Miller talks about something she experienced on a subway train in New York City.
Yes.
Where, there was a gentleman who was having a really rough day, and he was inviting people over to sit with him, and nobody wanted to because his behavior was erratic, and he was throwing pieces of his chicken lunch around, and trying to share it with people, and things weren't going very well, and everybody had moved away from him. And a grandmother and granddaughter who looked like they were wearing their Sunday best, going to or from church, went, and he invited them to sit with him, and they went and they sat with him.
Yes.
And they treated him like the precious soul that he is and had a conversation with him. And, I think that grandmother clearly had transmitted that way of being to that grandchild.
Yes.
Because they did that without even speaking to each other. They just looked at each other. They knew that's the right thing to do. Yep. That's the loving thing to do, and they did it.
It was such a wonderful encapsulation of what Lisa learns and ends up teaching, and now is continuing to perpetuate. And so, when she talks about that in the book, she then quotes a piece from Matthew's Gospel. She's Jewish, but she saw that in that moment. Like, even just watching what happened in that moment, she didn't put that piece of gospel passage together in that moment. She does that later. But that's what she saw in that moment. And so to see people actually live out that expression of faith faithfully. Yes. So in other words, not just read about it, not just say you believe it, but to just live it. That was what was so striking to her, was that these two people, a grandmother and a granddaughter, through those teachings and what you just said, which was having somebody in your life who talks about it but lives it as well, that idea of total love, total inclusion, and when it's just in their nature, then it gets instilled in somebody else, because it isn't about, I hear you say that, but you live something different.
True.
You don't even say it. You just live it. And that makes such a huge difference.
Well, I think that's one of the challenges of the moment, because what you're describing isn't fake. And it's not about saying the right words or pretending. It's about actually modeling the behavior. And my mom always talked about Jesus as this beautiful light and as a person, a human being that was giving. And so my perspective was through that foundation. There's so many people who feel that Jesus wasn't real, or that it's an interpretation, or they feel like religion, it makes them smaller. They're focused on morality and sin, and they feel like it's controlling, and there's all these things that are negative about the way faith is expressed in our society. And then they see people who are people of faith doing hurtful and negative things, and then they say, well, look at that, it's hypocrisy, it's not real. How do you speak to that? Because this is a time when there's a lot of rejection of faith.
So I think, again, it's the difference between being a person who is spiritual and who engages in spiritual practices and lives that out.
Yes.
And altruism is a spiritual practice, right? Taking care of the other, love of neighbor. And the legalistic, rule-oriented parts of religion, right? And I think human beings, we can take anything and kind of mess it up, right? No matter how beautiful and pure and lovely and life-giving it is, we can muck around with it. And so I think what we have done is we have decided that there are these rules and this way of being, and this interpretation of Scripture, which I would argue is Scripture is beautiful and can be interpreted in an infinite number of ways, but we can take the goodness of spirituality and make it look very, very negative. And that's what we tend to see on the news too.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
We see the worst of the worst, the people that are abusers, and the church that is exclusive and rejecting of, people who belong to the 2S LGBTQ community, or women, or
yes,
whatever.
But do you believe that it's not just about believing, but do you believe that it's not just about belief? Okay. That it's also about what the practice of faith does to you, that it changes you, or it molds you, or like in mindfulness, we talk about the practice, and that it is in the practice that you change.
Yes.
Is it in the faith and the practicing of the Christian faith that you change?
It is in the spiritual practices in which we live out in our faith, absolutely. So it's like a caterpillar going into a chrysalis and changing and morphing and coming out a butterfly, right? It's that kind of change, and it's prayer and meditation and labyrinth walking and taking care of our neighbor. All of those things are what are transformative, just like being in that chrysalis.
I also think it's really helpful to have people in your life, as we talked earlier, who model that for you, so that the two people in my life who've done that most consistently and most authentically is my mother and my wife. Sue Ann can. We all have our moments. We all,
Of course.
We all struggle, just like everybody else struggles in life. We struggle in life too. But Sue Ann has a way of being very consistent in living, expressing herself and building herself up through her spiritual practices. And then walking the walk when she's helping to lead other people through that, and trying every day to go through a series of practices and going through her life and so on, and then teaching that same thing to other people. And it's helped me just to watch her, and to have somebody who I share life with, who I can see so often, express that love fully, completely. And that's the other thing I was trying to get across from whether it was my mother or my wife, is this ability to just show that love to everybody all the time.
Right.
Even when they're struggling themselves, to do that, I think helps people around them to feel like they're authentic. That the faith isn't just something I've learned, isn't just something that I talk about. It is actually just part of me. It's just who I am, like how I'm being,
Right.
not just what I'm doing.
And the struggle is part of the practice.
Always. Jesus never said that we weren't going to suffer. The idea, because he suffered, the idea was, what do you do in your suffering? How do you respond to that suffering? And how do you respond to the suffering of others?
Now, in Lisa Miller's book, it's not just about the science. As you mentioned, there are many stories weaved throughout the book that are examples of love, of faith, and the practice of faith. But there's something else that she's exploring in this particular book that is about service. We're going to be exploring her book over the next, 11 episodes. What do you think is important about this piece around service and awakening that part of yourself?
So I think that Lisa Miller talks about two ways of living and two ways of being, right? She talks about the achieving brain,
yes,
and the awakened brain. And she argues that many people go through life focused on their achieving brain, right? Just, what is my next goal? What is my next goal? What is my next goal? And not experiencing that inner peace and joy and satisfaction. And yet when we begin to use our awakened brain, when we begin to be open to what the world has to say to us, what the people in our life, what the creatures in our life, what the plants and everything in our life have to communicate to us, because everything is full of the divine presence, we begin to walk in step. Our rhythm changes, right? We become part of the flow, not blocking the flow or pushing back against it. And what naturally comes from that is loving service, is taking care of others. And when we take care of others, we make our world a better place. And it's a better place for them, and it's a better place for us.
It's actually one of the cool things. Not only are we wired for spirituality, what Lisa's data shows, which we've seen from other sources as well, is that when we help others, they feel better. When we help others, we feel better. And so one of the key phenotypes that she talks about is altruism. It's that sense of helping others for their own good. What the result of it is that we actually do good for ourselves as well. And it isn't about serving ourselves. It's just so neat that we are wired in such a way that when we help others, it actually makes us feel better.
We're so interconnected.
It's the interconnection.
And isn't this what Jesus taught?
Yes.
Right? Jesus taught, love your neighbor.
Yes.
Jesus told stories about the Samaritan, who was the outsider, who was the reviled, person, if you were Jewish. And yet that was the hero of his story.
Yeah.
And everyone is our neighbor, and we are to reach out with love to everyone. And, Jesus was a wisdom teacher. And I think sometimes we fail to delve deeply enough into his sayings and his stories to find the really precious kernels of love.
Why don't we do that in our next episode? Why don't we look at the altruism piece that Dr. Miller talks about, and then some of these kernels that you're talking about from Jesus, like, and just, bring those parables and the science together and have that conversation, because sometimes we don't. We don't bring those things together. Is that cool? Are you open to that?
Sure.
Are you willing to come back to your podcast to have that conversation?
We are willing to talk about this as long as anybody wants to hear us talk about this, because it's. I think right now, especially in a day and age when division and even hate seems to be, and grievance, like people feeling like they have to blame things on others, because life is really hard right now for a lot of people. And the answer, we believe, that Lisa's book helps to enlighten is that there's another way for us to react to this in a way that will be beneficial to us and also beneficial to others in our lives and in the world. And, for us, we believe there are spiritual practices. They don't have to be a church service. It just has to be ways for us to be closer to, however people look at it existentially, a higher power or a creator or whatever that may be, but to make that connection, and then makes us healthier. And when we are healthier, we're much more likely to do things like be altruistic.
I could be in this pod with both of you for another hour. I feel healed. I'm so grateful for your time, and so grateful that you guys are doing this. It's good.
Two priests on the patio. Sure hope you enjoyed the show. If there's anything you want to know, just ask. Two priests on the patio. Yeah.
Well, friends, thank you for being with us. If this stirred something in you, share the episode and subscribe. The path of awakening isn't linear. It's layered, lived, and often lonely. But you are not alone. We'll meet you in the stillness, in our prayers. We'll meet you in the questions. And until next time, stay compassionate, stay open, stay